welcome to Crime Time 911. Have you ever heard a story where you were it just seems so wild that you had to pause for a minute and like wonder, would anybody really fall for this, or is this even true? Well, that's definitely the case when it comes to Robert Hendy Freegard. He pretended to be MI5. He convinced his victims that they were targets of the IRA and that their lives were in danger and all kinds of crazy things. And his victims weren't like foolish people. They were smart, intelligent people. This guy was just so convincing that he could convince anybody that they were in danger. So grab your cup of coffee and let's dive in. So who was Robert Hendy Freegard? Robert Hendy Freegard was born March 1st, 1971. He worked in a bar and as a car salesman. That's how he met some of his victims. He met them in social situations. So he didn't meet them like, it's not one of these typical, online things that you normally hear about. This is like people, like he met these people in person first before he brainwashed them or convinced them or whatever you want to call it into thinking that he worked for the MI5, that they were in danger, that the IRA was looking for them, and all the good, not the good things, but all the things. So across all 5 of his victims, the total financial loss is around 1 million euros. So I'm not really sure what that equates to in Canadian or US dollars, but I mean, 1 million in your own currency is huge. So how he would do this is, like I said, he claimed that he worked for the MI5. He claimed that the IRA had marked them for as targets, I guess is the best way to put it. He would advise them that they need to go into hiding. That was the only option that they had in order to avoid, tragic occurrences happening from the supposed IRA. And he told them that they had to cut off ties from everyone. You can't be in contact with friends, family, coworkers, nobody. Everybody in your social circle, whether, close family members or just the odd acquaintance, you weren't allowed to be in contact with anybody because otherwise the IRA would find out where you were. He would also advise them that they needed to empty their bank accounts for safety reasons. Again, I guess alluding to if you're leaving an electronic trail, the IRA is going to find you. So his first victim was named Sarah. So in the early 1990s, Sarah met Rob while he was working as a barman in a student pub nearby. He invites her to stay behind after closing. Now, I would find that kind of creepy. Like, I don't know. Maybe she thought he was cute. Maybe she thought he was charming. I don't know what she was thinking at the time, obviously. Maybe a little bit of too much alcohol kind of played into the factor. But I feel like if I was hanging out at a bar and the barman, which I'm assuming is like a bartender over there in Europe, asked me to stay behind after the bar closed, I think I'd be a little sketched out, to be completely honest. But again, Robert was one of those people that were just able to, charm anybody, convince everybody that he was just the most friendliest person, that he was on their side, basically stop any red flags from going up. Robert was one of the masters at that. So Robert works on Sarah. He gains her trust. He lets her know that he's on her side. He's her friend. All the things that he needs to do in order to basically completely take over her mental state, her, control her mind and all those things, like basically take away her own thought process, I guess. You know what I mean? Like basically just control her, convince her that what he is saying is true and that there's no other options for other than what he is about to tell her. After Sarah's showing signs that she trusts Robert more and that she's more relaxed around him, he then confides in her that he is an undercover MI5 agent fighting against the IRA. He mentions real IRA attacks that were happening between 1990 and 1992 over in that area. So that makes his story more believable. Like, the IRA is after her because they are attacking, an area that's close around or very well known to people in Europe at the time, right? So she kind of, he uses that as leverage to be like, hey, you're on their list, you're on their radar. They want to, take you out basically. And that he tells her that she can help out her country by going into hiding and, just following his rules. If you follow my rules, you can help out your country. I'm not really sure where the logic is, but again, when you're under that mind control, you're probably not thinking logically at that point. He controls her by saying that she's being watched, that the IRA is constantly watching her. He, again, like I said, tells her to cut off all ties with her family and friends. You can't have communication with anybody other than me. Otherwise, the IRA is going to find you. He performs loyalty tests, some of which were psychological manipulation, and even some of them were quite humiliating. I don't know the full details of what these tests had consisted of, but I'm sure it wasn't pleasant either way, because, if she's willing to do something that would embarrass her, then that shows how loyal she is to him, right? And then, he just eventually just breaks her down emotionally and mentally. That's how they gain control, is they break you down, they break you down, they break you down. They get rid of all your self-esteem. They get rid of all of your independent thoughts. They make you basically fully reliant on them, that they are the only person that can help you. They are the only person that you can trust. So this is what Robert had done in order to gain control of Sarah. He eventually exploits her financially. So for many years, like this went on for years, not just, a few weeks or a couple of months. This was something that she endured for years. Any money that she was receiving in any way, shape, or form, Robert took from her. He would tell her that he needs those to, fund different operations that would help fight against the IRA, and that it was for her protection as well, right? So, but behind the scenes, Sarah doesn't know that obviously Robert is using those funds for his own gain, his own personal gain, so that he can go and, I don't know, maybe buy some new clothes or go have a good time, or maybe even, start manipulating the next girl, right? So poor Sarah is in hiding, all communication to anybody and everybody that she's ever known outside of Robert, terrified for her life, thinking that she's on the radar and that somebody's going to come and do something terrible to her at any given moment, while he's out having fun and having a great time. That's pretty disgusting. So then eventually, Robert meets Maria Hendy, actually. How Robert met Maria was through a roommate named John Atkinson, who was also already under Robert's control at the time. John tells Maria that he has terminal cancer and that he needs to go away for treatment. So Maria, trusting John because she's already roommates with this guy for however long, she trusts him, she's known him as a friend for a while, goes along with him, just to be that supportive friend. Who wouldn't, like, if you had a close friend or family that, just told you that they had terminal cancer and that they had to go away for treatment, you're more than likely going to want to go with them if you're able to, right? You want to be there for moral support and, just be there for them in what you believe is the most, troubling time and toughest time that they're going to ever have to go through. So eventually, somehow the story changes from John having terminal cancer and needs to go away for treatment to the IRA is after you and you're in danger. So I'm not really sure how that story shifted, but Basically it was the same kind of situation that Sarah went through. Eventually Robert gets his hooks into Maria and tells her, you're on the IRA radar, you're under surveillance, blah 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 blah, all the same things he told Sarah. Convinces her that she needs to go into hiding, again, cut off all communication with everybody she basically knows in her entire life. She's under strict rules, has to hand over any finances that she does receive from wherever over to Robert in order to, again, fund the prosecution and whatever else to take down the IRA. And he used fear-based control with Maria, used different things of, if you go outside, the IRA is going to find you and they're going to get you, or you can't call anybody because the IRA will track that and find you and, again, get you and all this stuff, right? So, and again, similarly to Sarah, Maria goes through this for years as well. I don't know how Robert convinces women to stay in hiding for years upon years upon years. Even kidnapping victims who, have the Stockholm syndrome. Eventually, they are going to figure out, wait a minute, something isn't right here. Or, oh, here's my opportunity to escape when, my captor is gone. Robert becomes the center of Maria's world. He tells her that you're being watched, that I'm MI5 and you must obey me. You must obey what I say in order for you to stay safe. I'm the only one that can keep you safe. I'm the only one that can protect you. All the things to make his fake story believable in her eyes. However, in Maria's case, she actually did eventually come to her senses, I guess, in a way. She did manage to escape eventually. I'm not sure. There must have obviously been a trigger or something that sort of clicked and said, wait a minute, something doesn't seem right here. So she was able to eventually escape after years and years and years of this abuse, mentally, manipulation, all the things that Robert was doing to her. But the emotional and financial damage is so severe that, it's still traumatizing to her. So even though she wasn't necessarily physically abused, her mental state alone would have been pretty bad, I would assume. And, obviously the financial devastation, I'm sure he dug her into a major debt. And now she's got to, she's escaped and now she's got to figure out how to deal with all that. So eventually, Robert meets Kim Adams. Kim meets Adam while he's working as a Volkswagen salesman, which was one of his favorite covers, one of his favorite, ruses to reel in his victims. So Robert has the ability to charm his customers. He's a typical salesman. He charms you in order to get the sale. However, in this case, he charms some people to build that rapport. And then eventually, after he's gained that trust again, tells them that he works for the MI5, undercover, blah, blah, blah. Your target IRA is going to get you, all those things again. Kim was actually an American psychologist. So you would think that being a psychologist that she would see through that mind manipulation. But honestly, Robert was just so good and so convincing that Kim didn't realize that he was lying. She thought he was just an exciting, this guy who leads this really exciting, secretive life. And I guess that is what intrigued her and kind of allowed him to hook her and, get a hold of her. He tells her that she is being considered as an MI5 recruitment. So that obviously must make her very excited as well. She's already intrigued that Robert is supposedly working on, in the secretive life with the MI5. Now she might have the opportunity to do the same. How exciting would that be? You know what I mean? So I'm sure that's how he got her. He knew that he couldn't do his typical tactics on her like he did with the other two. He knew he had to find a different angle, an angle that would work for her because she was in psychology, and he succeeded. So eventually, Kim tells her parents the same lies that Robert tells her, which shows the depths of the influence that Robert had over her. As with his other victims, Kim is isolated. She becomes withdrawn. She's emotionally distressed. She's cut off from everybody she knows. Kim and Robert were hiding in a hotel in the Alps. So it wasn't really, obviously, it wasn't for romantic purposes. It was more about the controlled isolation. So, bringing her to the Alps kind of isolated her away from, what she knew already. And then he eventually claims that they're going to move to a Scottish lighthouse for undercover work. Now, I don't know what lighthouses are like inside. I've never been in one, but I can't imagine it would be very comfortable to live in. If you know more about lighthouses than I do, maybe there is like a little apartment, or I don't even know. But if you know more about it, you definitely drop it in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious. But how is somebody going to live in a lighthouse? That's basically my question. How is somebody going to live in a lighthouse? So in Kim's situation, how Robert was getting money from Kim is that he would have Kim contact her parents and ask for thousands of dollars at a time to fund operations and security. So this is kind of where the things start to fall apart when it comes to Robert and Kim. So obviously, naturally, after however many times that her parents might have given her the funding, eventually the parents start to wonder, like, is this like legit? Like, if they're really part of the MI5, why are they asking us for money? Shouldn't the MI5 have lots of money to fund different operations and all that stuff? Like, it wouldn't have made sense, right? So her parents start to investigate. Then the authorities get involved, and they connect Kim's disappearance to other victims that Robert had control over in the past. So eventually the police set up a sting operation. Kim still believes that she's on this mission of whatever, this mission that Robert has convinced her that she's on. But eventually the police move in, they arrest Robert, and this is when it kind of clicks for Kim. This is when the spell breaks, that she realizes, oh, this isn't real. Like, I've been duped, basically. Like, what is going on here? So after Robert is arrested, Kim would return to the USA and started to rebuild her life. So I'm hoping that Kim is on the right, but not just Kim, but Sarah and Maria. I hope that they're all on the right path now. I hope that they, are in a good place mentally. I'm sure, trusting new people is not easy to them anymore, which is totally understandable. But I hope they're all well. Sometime after Robert's arrest, when he's caught with Kim, he is freed. So he's got 3 victims under his belt at that point that we know of. He's been arrested, he's been released, and now guess what he does? He moves on to victim number 4, Sandra Clifton. Sandra is the single mother of 2 in her 40s and was recently divorced. When she meets Robert, he is going by David Hendy at this time, and that is in between 2011 2012. So this is a while after Kim meets him, right? So clearly he spent probably a few years in jail. Clearly not enough time. And like the other 3 victims, Sandra, starts to become withdrawn. She's becoming secretive. She's unreachable to her friends and family. She's definitely not like the Sandra that everybody knew and loved. Eventually, Sandra cuts off ties with her own children. Like, I have 4 kids of my own, and I feel like, I don't know, it would be pretty difficult to get me to cut all ties off from my children. You would probably have to do a lot of convincing and what God knows whatever else. But I guess that's what David did to Sandra. He said whatever he needed to say. She cut off ties from her, family, friends, her children. And she basically just disappears from her old life. Her poor children searched for her for 7 years. Could you imagine what those poor children were going through? Like, your mother just up and leaves, no explanation, no nothing, just poof, gone, basically. And these poor children are looking for her for 7 years. That's a long time. And those poor children must have, I can't even imagine what they must have been feeling. It would have been devastating for sure. So Robert does the same thing he does with all his victims. He isolated her. He took away her dependence. He instilled fear. He, did everything and anything he could to keep her under his control. Eventually, journalists ended up locating Sandra in rural France in 2022. So they met in 2011, 2012, and journalists find her in 2022. So at the time that the journalists find her, she's living with Robert in rural France, running a dog breeding operation. Now, this dog breeding operation is suspected to not be legitimate. And eventually, in August of 2022, the French police inspect the property. So Robert, during this time when the French police are there inspecting the property, Robert tries to flee. And when he tries to flee, he ends up running over 2 officers. So Robert is arrested and charged with attempted harm of public officials. So even after Robert is arrested and a Netflix documentary is released, Sandra's not the same person anymore. She still remains distant. She's not the Sandra she once was. So Robert, I feel, really did a lot of damage to Sandra. Maybe she was a little bit more vulnerable, especially because she had just recently gone through a divorce. So she might not have she might have already been in a not like a fragile mental state to begin with. So I feel like she was really mostly affected by Robert, at least, longer than the rest of the victims might have been. And then there's a 5th victim. So this 5th victim is unnamed. There's not a lot of public details released on this last victim. After all that, like I said, Robert was arrested in France after injuring 2 police officers when he's trying to run from the police at the time. He was held in jail while the police built the case against him. Robert is arrested in August 2022. Eventually, there's finally, after years and years, I guess, I don't know how long it took for the police to build their case. But as anybody who follows true crime or any, court-related stories, that, from the time that somebody's arrested, it takes a few years before you actually get to trial and get to a verdict. So now fast forward to February 2025, he's found guilty of injuring the 2 officers. So that's a plus. I'm guessing that it was, attempted unaliving, because what else? Like you're trying to run somebody down with a vehicle there can't be any other way. That's definitely not an accident, right? But he was sentenced to only 6 years in prison. So even if you are not charged in any sort of like homicide, I feel like 6 years for injuring 2 police officers with a vehicle is definitely not enough time. Like, that's a slap on the wrist, in my opinion. However, in Europe or in France, obviously I don't know their laws. I don't know how they work over there. So obviously they must have different rules than what we have in Canada or even the US. So not only was Robert sentenced to 6 years in prison, he was also ordered to compensate the officers. So now he owes the officers compensation for injuring them. The prosecutors say that he acted deliberately, which obviously I wasn't even there, and I totally agree. After everything he's trying to do, after all the people he's frauded, of course, he's going to do anything and everything he can to try to get away and not get arrested again, right? So clearly he was acting deliberately. He was desperate to get out of there at that time. So he was going to plow through anyone and everyone who was going to step in his way. As of right now, Robert is serving his sentence in France and may actually get more charges laid against him for the illegal dog breeding operation. As for Sandra, it was still sort of like a complicated situation. She, despite witnessing everything that she had witnessed that day, even though, people thought that, this is it. She's seen who he is. She understands that he's not the person that he claims to be. He still has his hooks in her. She was still with him at the time of his arrest. Her family hopes that she can eventually break free. Her kids are probably devastated because they found their mother. Their mother is finally found, and she's still being controlled by this guy that's in prison. So I'm assuming that she's probably not having much of a relationship with them now that they have found her. What do you think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you don't miss out on another episode. And thank you once again for listening to Crime Time 911. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember to always trust your gut.